Very good evening to you and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. I want to welcome everybody on this Tuesday evening, whether you're joining in from Guyana, somewhere else in the diaspora, in the wider Caribbean, North America, Europe, wherever you are. Welcome to Politics 101. Please do let everybody know that the program is on. Share the link, do the usual things that we do so that we know that Politics 101 is on. Well, this evening we are going to be continuing our discussion of the 7% offer to the public servants by the government, 7% offer to the public servants by the PPP government. There's been lots of discussion on this so-called offer by the PPP to the public servants. Is it really a salary increase? What is it behind the number 7%? What's behind the number? The PPP and its supporters, they've been throwing around charts showing lesser increases in other countries. 2% here, 1% there, 3% there. They're not saying 2% of how much or 3% of how much. It's just that 2% in America is less than 7% in Guyana. 1% in some other place is less than 7% in Guyana. Kind of insult our intelligence. But anyhow, they're entitled to do what they have to do, and we have to do what we have to do. What does 7% of what workers are earning, what does that mean? There have been comparisons with the coalition government, and that they themselves, when they were in office, they did not negotiate with the unions, and they also made offers to the workers, to the public servants, without consultation with the union. Is it a fair comparison? Is it a fair comparison between how the coalition dealt with the matter and how this government is dealing with the matter? What about the fact that we are now an oil-producing nation? What about the fact that some workers, like the teachers, have not had any pay raises since 2019, since the coalition was in office? What about 7% against the recent announcement of the rise in prices? I mean, every Guyanese now knows the meaning of inflation. I remember when I was a college student, a word like inflation sound like a big word, you know? You used to have those things on your exams. Now, I suppose almost every Guyanese knows what is inflation. What about inflation? And how does this so-called 7% stand up against inflation? What about the comparison if one accepts the fact that this is really not as an offer of a salary raise. This is another handout by the PPP. How does this handout of 7% of what public servants earn, when one compares that to the handout given to the sugar workers, so-called 7,000 sugar workers? We learned on this program a few weeks ago that it's not 7,000. It's more like 4,000. So this other 3,000, the money supposedly allocated for the other 3,000 wage. But anyhow, when you compare 7% of what public servants are earning against $250,000 each for these sugar workers, and before that, the flood relief, which we don't know the real price tag. We don't know, for example, how much the average rice farmer who was affected by the floods, how much they got. So in an ethnically sensitive society, not of my doing or your doing, it's the doing of history. And we are here, and we have a government of one ethnic group distributing government resources, common resources. And you give one group X amount, you give another group Y amount. And the gap seems to be so wide between the two. Is there any surprise that people are beginning to talk about the ethnic implications of this 7%? I think it was Colin Lucas, the Calypsonian, had a nice jumpy calypso a few years ago. How it go look? How it go look? How it go look? Did the PPP sit down and ask itself how it go look? So from the trade unions to the political parties, we saw the Guyana civil society organizations, some of them coming out. The average woman, man in the street, basically saying that, look, this is an insult. The Public Service Union is calling on its members to go slow. TUC, they've all come out. But then, of course, as we say, the other side, I opened the Guyana Times this morning. I couldn't, after reading the Guyana Times, I couldn't go to the Guyana Chronicle. 7% of something is better than nothing. Saying that 7% is enough. Defending the 7%, it's one of the things that is amazing about that very few, if any, voices in support of the PPP could muster the courage to say, no, man, this little fine change, as J.H.K. Lal put it, this change is not good enough for those workers. Oh no. Oh no. I can understand the government justifying it. But if you are not the government, you're a supporter, I suppose. You mean you can't find the courage? It is why when someone like Christopher Ram, who helped to bring the government to power, who helped, by his own admission, he participated in court cases, he contributed to the narrative, but he had the courage, has the courage. He was on this very program last week in which he said the PPP knew that they couldn't reopen the estates. And then you have people like Jeffrey De Silva, former Minister of Trade, ambassador under the PPP, talking about the corruption trajectory of the PPP. You have over there at the Kaieteur News, they're flaying the PPP for its attitude to oil and gas. Chris Ram said the PPP is not interested in good governance in the oil industry. We have over there at Stabroek News, they're writing editorials criticizing the government. It is why we have to pay attention to what those people are saying. Alan Fenty saying the PPP is ungrateful after the international community helped them and the way in which they're governing. Are they considering the international community? These are all people who supported the narrative that brought the government to power, and for the last 15 months sat down while the government has been governing like thugs and have said nothing. And now, when it looked like the boat already gonna fall, they are saying, but it is better for them to come out now than never to come out, because there are those who will never come out. They're helping our cause. To hear Christopher Ram saying what Winston Jordan has been saying for the last year is not only to prove that Jordan was right, but also to prove that aspects of the economic thrust of the coalition were correct, especially as it relates to the sugar industry. Even if the implementation of what they wanted to do might not have been, from a political standpoint, implemented in the way they would have loved to get the narrative out, even if they fell down there, their prognosis of what was wrong with sugar was correct. And their attempt to correct the prognosis was correct. That they honor their responsibility to the workers in terms of their severance. That is now being proven correct for a government that took a lot of blows on this issue of sugar. No government is perfect. As I said at the beginning of the program a few minutes ago, the coalition government also did not negotiate with the unions. It gave what it thought was enough for the workers. It gave them. But I think the argument that I'm doing it because you did it when you were in office is a shallow argument. It doesn't get you far. It doesn't get you far. I did it because I am doing it because you did it. The circumstances in which it's done is very important. I think we are at that point where we've got to get serious. One cannot look at where we've been in the last year and a quarter and say we are comfortable with that trajectory, to use the silver term. One is comfortable with that trajectory. He's talking about the trajectory of corruption. We have the trajectory of distribution of resources, the failure to do the audit of that big $9 billion. Is it because they forgot? Is it because they couldn't find auditors? Or is there something that the audit might have brought to the fore that they did not want? I think I understand politicians. And I've said always that do not believe that the people who are running the PPP government, that they're stupid. They're not. They're stupid people. They may look incompetent, but incompetence is really not the cause of what they're doing. It may look incompetent, but it's deliberate. That incompetence is a deliberate thing. They're deliberate about what they're doing. And if we begin to treat it in that way, we'll better understand. That is why we have to draw on our resources. We're going to be speaking tonight to someone who I consider to be the hardest working ex-minister. Let me elaborate on that a little. You are in government and you are running the country, and you're out of government and you put your tail between your legs and go home. It's a dereliction of duty. If you were in government yesterday, you have to today defend what you did, acknowledge what you didn't do correctly, but also help the population to understand what is being done. Is there continuity? Is there a U-turn? Ex-ministers have a responsibility that is equal to the government of the day. I was on a program in Antigua on Sunday, and we were talking about Minister Asset Michael, who the ruling party there is trying to get rid of, and he has gone to court, and he has gotten the court to give an injunction stopping the party from not inviting him to executive meetings and from replacing him as the candidate for the party at the next election. It's an interesting case there. And I think the moderator asked me, why is Michael proven to be such a difficult person? And I said, one of the reasons is that Asset Michael, being so long in the Labour Party, he knows where the bodies are buried. As an ex-minister, you know where the PPP is going to try to exploit. You were there. You know where the loopholes are. You are going to be better able to catch them. I can, because you were there. You know, some people say that, look, when Winston Jordan was a minister, he didn't do this, he didn't do that, he didn't do that. And to some extent, they're correct. To a large extent, they're correct. But not because he didn't do this or he didn't do that, that today what he's saying should not make sense. That's not how logic operates. I know logic is a hard thing. The hardest course I ever took in my university career, logic. I think I got a B grade. And so logic may trip people up. The logic can't be that because you made mistakes when you were in government, that you can hold the new government accountable. And that we're not going to listen to Jordan because Jordan didn't do this when he was in power. It's like the PPP. I am blousing you because men before blows you, so I can't be wrong. Crooked logic. So Winston Jordan, for me, is the hardest working ex-minister. Whatever you think about his stewardship when he was finance minister, he's out here talking. So you get a chance to ask him questions directly about what he did. I can't say the same for the other ministers. I can't. Thank God for more than small mercies, helping us to understand the trajectory of the PPP and what it is doing. It's always a pleasure to have Brother Jordan on, and when somebody like myself say Brother Jordan, that is a promotion, you know, because we radicals steeped in the black power struggle and the working class Caribbean radical struggle, a brother means that you've passed the test. You've passed this test. That you stand on the side of the poor and the powerless. So, in the word, Winston Jordan is here. We're going to be talking about 7% and all the other things. And as usual, what we try to do on this program is not just to mobilize you, but to get you as a form of mobilization. The kind of public education that any progressive society needs. That's what we endeavor to do on this program. Not to teach you what you already know, but to take your own experiences. As Quiana said, take your own experiences, refine them, and then give them back to you as political nourishment. That's what we are going to be doing on this program. That's what we have been doing on this program. So, Politics 101 is on, and we are ready to roll. Mr. Jordan, welcome. Is Mr. Jordan there with us?
You hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Okay, yes. I said that good night to you and good night to your viewers. And before you get a chance to ask me about the 7% and so on, permit me to make two quick observations.
Wonderful.
The first one is that if I got you correct, you did say that we ended up imposing salary increases, and we did not negotiate with the unions. Am I getting you correct?
Yes.
Well, that is not necessarily so. And, you know, I see this being said by a number of commentators as if to balance the scales. But let the reality step in. When we came in 2015, we had wide-ranging discussions with the GPSU. The Ghana Teachers Union had already had an agreement, a 5-year agreement that overlapped into our period when we came in. They had settled with the PPP on a 5% every year for 5 years and a 1% top-up and some other things and so on. So our main discussions were with the GPSU. And if you check and you go through my 2015 budget and my 2016 budget, you will see emphases that reflected us coming out of discussions with the GPSU. One of the things the GPSU benefited immediately was the fact that we set aside monies to help improve the GPSU infrastructure in Thomas Lands. I sat down with Mr. Yard and agreed that government will put in a certain amount and the union will put in a certain amount in a collaborative, cooperative approach to, for example, fence the ground. Because if you remembered well, the previous government was attempting to take away GPSU lands in Thomas Lands.
Right.
So quickly to have those lands fenced. And GPSU, Mr. Yard, will tell you that it's the government who paid for that fence. And I don't recall whether the union put in any money, but I'm not going to use that as any block. I put into my budget that we recognize that, for example, allowances hadn't been raised in about 19 or 20 years. And we would like to correct this. And we moved to set up a committee to look into these allowances. We even had the lady who died, who was used to be a commissioner on the Elections Commission for the PNC, and she died. Ms. Jones. We even contracted her to do up the terms of reference for that committee, and she did. And there were a number of meetings, okay? But at the end of the day, it takes 2 hands to clap. It takes 2 hands to clap. Every time before we instituted what is called an imposed increase, we met with the union. I think it would be fair to say, though, that we never reached agreement before we paid out any increases, okay? Now, if you understand how government budgeting works, even if you don't meet an agreement, if you don't pay that money in that year, it's lost. It's lost. So negotiations can't drag out into the next year unless you are attempting to build a multi-year agreement. In which case, when you sign that multi-year agreement, you already know what you have to pay in year 1. You already know what you have to pay in year 2. You already have to know what you pay in year 3. But if you have no agreement whatsoever, and you've set aside some monies in the budget, if you don't pay that money out in that fiscal year, it's lost. It can't go over to the next year as such. So as I come back and I say, 2 hands got to clap. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to blame anybody and so on, but I'm saying to you that in the coalition government, you had one of the most progressive pro-labor government. Compare that with 15 months so far. And this government has never met with the GPSU. Never once. If you say they had to do an emergency hurry budget and they couldn't meet with the GPSU in 2020, how can you say the same thing in 2021? When GPSU has written several letters, nobody has responded to any one of those letters. That is what Mr. Yard said. Mr. Light from the GTU, because they're looking to negotiate a new package and so on. He said he has written several letters to the Ministry of Education, to the President and Vice President, and no one has responded to him. We have never treated the unions in that manner. It is the coalition government also that put in place annual subvention to all the unions for their workers' education. All the unions. and it is the coalition government that gave the teachers union the best package they got from any one of the governments.
Mm-hmm.
And forced to do that. Don't forget it's His Excellency who had set up a team to meet with the unions, a multidisciplinary team to meet with the unions to sort of reach an agreement on a package for the teachers. And that is what they have to thank us for, because we put that in place. We helped partially solve their debunching issues. We agreed to change the scales by bringing in a professional person to look at the scales and so forth. We agreed to all of that. And this is part of the agreement that the GTU is attempting to get this government to honor. But of course, they're not getting any response. Okay? So I just wanted to set that record straight. It's not the case that we just sat down there and imposed things. Mr. Yard met with the President Granger on a number of occasions. All right? I wouldn't say they're a collegial thing, but I saw them meeting one-to-one, hugging each other, talking to each other, and so forth. There was no adversarial relationship between our government and the unions as such. And we talked about a multi-year agreement. Again, as I would say, it will take two hands to clap. All right? And if we have time, we can come back to this subject, and I will broaden and tell you exactly what I mean when I say it takes two hands to clap. It's an old proverb, but it has deep meaning when it comes to the relationship between government and unions. And the quick comment I want to make on the second one is that indeed, a number of people say, well, you know, Jordan should have done this and Jordan should have done that and so forth. People don't like the word, but look, Jordan is a creature of the cabinet. Jordan can go off on his own and do different things. What we failed to do in terms of our PR is that we didn't get out there that in the short space of 3.5 years, stretching it to 4 years, what we would have done to empower all races in this country, but in particular, African Guyanese, who tend to think they want, who tend people say they want. We stretched out our hands, but we could not accomplish in 4 years what 23 years before had destroyed. And if we look at it very carefully, what even 15, 20 years, even before those 23 years, had destroyed. I mean, the devaluations, I keep telling people the devaluations of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s decimated largely African Guyanese in this country. Largely African Guyanese. Why? Because they are the ones on more or less fixed incomes. Fixed incomes. They weren't entrepreneurs. So right away, when you devalue your currency, your wages don't keep pace with that devaluation. You devalue by 200%, and you get a wage increase of 6%. So for you to survive, you got to go looking for your savings or go begging or do 2 or 3 more works and so on. So the whole issue about wages even today is a function of the history. And Clive Thomas and others have written about this history, and that is why you have this thing called wage debt. It's a debt that has accumulated over time from the decimation of incomes of largely blacks who suffered because of their occupation, the public service and civil service type occupations. And what you decimate over that period cannot be reinstated in a short period of 3.5 years. And this is what I was trying to get over in any discussions with the unions. When you put 50% increase 1 year, 45% increase another year, and 40% increase another year in a 3-year agreement, I mean, you can't be serious. You cannot be serious even as an opening sparring. And so you get difficulty there afterwards to move on. Because even though it is agreed that 50, 45, and 40 will move salaries and wages closer to what they should be. The reality is that the economy that you have can't accommodate those 50, 45, and 40. So these are some of the issues that don't play. But I understand when people say Jordan didn't do this and Jordan didn't do that. I will only end by saying governments don't win elections. Parties do. And if you get my drift where I'm going with that, you will understand what I'm saying. Governments don't win elections. Parties win elections. And I will say no more on that.
And I quite appreciate that point you made. It's one of the bones of contention while we were in government. What is the role of the party at the level of the APNU in which you didn't participate? That was a very animated discussion. What is the role of the party? Because the party is the one that faced the elections and they will have to win or lose the elections. And what is the role of the party? So I quite appreciate your drift. Wilson, I'm interested in your characterization of one hand don't tap, two hands don't tap. And you say, you said if we have time, you will come back to it, but we have time now. Elaborate.
Well, look, one hand don't clap means we have to collaborate.
Yes.
We have to collaborate to achieve common goals and objectives, okay? So we have to start out by understanding that we both believe that workers have to earn, I don't like to use the word, but I'm going to use it anyhow, they have to earn what is called a living wage. Huh? And a living has any number of circumstances behind it. One of which is the state of the economy, the sectors in which some people operate in, you know, the difficulty and degree of difficulty of the job, you know, the skill set, all these different things and so forth, okay? But it's generally accepted that workers should be in a position to earn a living wage and should be given emoluments commensurate with the tasks that they do and so forth. So when you come to the bargaining table, we have to have certain guidelines put out. One is, are you in for an every year salary negotiation, or can we agree on a multi-year? If we can agree, if we're moving towards a multi-year, where do we start? Well, we have to start on where we are in terms of the baseline salaries. Next, where do we want to go? Where do we want to go? Where can these salaries go? Given all the economic data that we can put out there, whether it's GDP growth, you know, whether the context inflation, you know, and all these different things, where can we agree that these salaries should go? And once we can get that out of the way, we can then sit and negotiate how we can reach there in terms of percentage increase annually, how we can reach there. Then when you do that, you can go on to the other aspects of the working conditions of the workers, principally the allowances, right? We know some of these allowances aren't, I mean, they're a joke. I mean, the food allowance and the travel allowance and all these things, some haven't been raised in 19 plus years. So we can then move on to again, and we can settle on some increases, baseline where we are, then some increases. And then we could go and do things like, look, hinterland, where things are very hard, we can put in extra allowances there, ration allowance for people in the hinterland, all these different kinds of things. We can do it. But we have to agree. When we done, we cost all this stuff. And it's now for the government, having agreed, to find the money to pay these things. But we were able to get beyond setting the guidelines. We never even were able to get beyond setting the guidelines. It was a frustrating task. I'm not blaming the unions, I'm not blaming the government, but what I'm saying, it was a frustrating task even to move off from that basic part. And I think both sides during the year got frustrated, time ran out, And by November, you begin to pay, this imposed, as you said, salary increases. But I still think if we really want to solve this burning issue of a living wage for public servants, there are going to have to be marathon meetings between the unions and the government. Both sides got to take away the hubris that both of them bring to the table and settle down with meaningful discussions. Secondly, the unions in particular have to understand this old style, throw mud kind of, for want of a better process, way of discussing things gone through the window. And they aren't the only ones who come with this kind of style. The private sector are also known to come with this style. It's one which says they come and they discuss with you, literally holding your head over a barrel. They bring no data, they do no research. So whatever if you said to the union, listen, you are asking for 50%. How much will it cost? They will tell you, well, I don't know, but that is your problem. Well, how can it be just my problem? How can you come to negotiation asking for a particular percentage and not knowing how much it will cost? Because that's the first thing the government will tell you. When I go back and I cost it, it comes to $20 billion. In all of my revenue that I see over the next 5 years, I don't see an increase of, say, $5 billion. But all this should have been known to the union if they employed a few people, 1 or 2 researchers, to do the grunt work for them, so that when they come to the bargaining table, they have their minimax positions. This minimum, we know, you don't have to tell us, this minimum is going to cost you $1.2 billion. And we know you can make this because if you relax, if you tighten up on the corruption here, if you tighten up on the concessions that you're giving away here, if you top up on the taxes here, and you can make 1.2. And so they are helpers in the government shaping policy. It is not a case where, okay, we come, you the employers, you the ones who have to find the solutions. It is why we have this bargaining and give and take, but you don't get that. You don't get that from the unions, and you don't get that from the private sector. I had numerous meetings with the private sector. And every one of them I used to have to say, listen, don't come to me asking for something when you don't have the data. You don't have the data to present showing what will be the effects of what you're asking for. It's like have to admire what takes place in the United States in Congress and so on. I mean, I know they got the staff and so on, but you don't see people, even consumer groups, civic groups and so on, going to Congress, with some slapdash thing. It is well researched. You have all the ducks lined up, all the cases, all the precedents. They have the models, the mathematical models, analytical models. They have their staff. They hire people who to come and help represent their case. Okay, we don't have that kind of money, but it doesn't mean that we can't hire a researcher. There are lots of people graduating from the University of Guyana with degrees in economics and in management and all these different things, looking for jobs. And you could the unions can employ 1 or 2 of those people to help do that background work. So that when they come to the bargaining table, they come fully prepared. And the government can't throw wool or dust in their eyes. Because they know the guts of the government accounts. They know everything about the balance of payments. They know everything about the government reserves. They know everything about the government's policies that's favoring the public servants. They know all the giveaways that the government is giving to the private sector. And if they roll back some of those and redirect to the public servants, that all these things. That is the kind of discussion that has to take place. And for that, it calls for radical surgery in all of the unions, including AWU.
The voice there of Winston Jordan, former finance minister. Mr. Jordan, let's move to the present. Having given us that background, let's move to the present. 7% by the government. Is that enough? How would you characterize that 7%?
Okay. Well, I don't want to sound like a soothsayer, as I said, but I had predicted that the government was going to pay somewhere in the region of 5 to 7% based on the amount that they put there, but which they falsely told the public servants that it was available for increase in wages and salaries. I knew better because that head includes any number of other payouts. So by the time I made rough estimates of what these payouts will be, I came up with a sum that was going to be left, and I reasoned somewhere between 5 and 7% with what they were going to pay. I'm not saying that that was enough, but I think it was listening to the senior minister making this disclosure from several standpoints. One, I suppose we have to thank the Lord that it's not the regular 5% that we were accustomed to in the previous incarnation, and that now they have upped it to 7%. But wait a minute, they are playing hocus pocus with numbers here, because this is 7% over a 2-year period, not a 1-year period. Mm-hmm. And people correctly analyze and divided that this is really 3.5% on the 2019 base for each year. So in other words, there is 3.5% on 2019 for 2020 and 3.5% on 2019 for 2021. It will be slightly less than 7% if we had used it in that compound sense. In other words, then if you did 3.5% on the 2019 base at 2020, and you did 3.5% on the 2020 base, it will come up to more than 7%. But since they're only paying 7%, it means then that the 2021 increase would have been slightly less than the 3.5%. But we don't want to complicate matters. Let us say it's 3.5% for each of the 2 years for on the 2019 base. Now, this increase means that the minimum wage will move to $4,900 in a gross sense. $4,900. And it means that the back pay for the ordinary worker, most of whom earn $100,000 and less, but let's stay with the $70,000 for the time being. The back pay will be roughly about $58,800 for the 12 months at $4,900. But here is what the problem is. Unlike the coalition government in 2018 and 2019 that paid this back pay in a tax-free sense, and your viewers should know, not only the public servants got tax-free back pay, a number of other institutions wrote us, public corporations, statutory agencies wrote us requesting to pay their back pay tax-free. And we acceded to their requests in both years. So perhaps that's one of the reasons why social media is full with bring back Uncle Winston. So yeah, so they will have to pay, this poor 70,000 minimum wage people gonna have to pay $16,624, or 28% of their back pay of $58,800. Imagine not paying these people for 24 months. 24 months since December of 2019. Imagine the pain and suffering public servants went through. And the unkindness of all cuts would be that you will tax their back pay, the little sum. So the poor 70,000 minimum wage worker who has got $4,900 as a result of this 7% and a $58,800 back pay will have to pay $16,624 at 28% income tax on that back pay, resulting in a take-home pay of roughly $42,000 plus dollars. If you take 24 months of that for $2,000, it means that roughly they are going to get about $1,764 per month. That's about $8.50 US.
Mm-hmm.
And if we break it down in a more granular manner, it means they will get $58 roughly per day at a 30-day month. That is about 25 cents US. Now, what can 25 cents US buy in United States versus Guyana? At $58, I don't know what you can buy these days with 58 Guyana dollars in Guyana. You know, it can't buy you a loaf of bread. It can't buy you a bag of tennis roll. I'm not sure what $58 can buy. So that in essence, in a granular manner, is the size of the increase that has been given to the workers after 24 months. The other feature of this increase is that they're gone back to the old, tired, worn out, across the board increase. Now, it doesn't take a genius to understand. If you are going to give any size increase, whether it's 7, 10, or whatever, in terms of equality, hey, you've done well. Everybody has got 7%. But in terms of equity, especially in a country like Guyana, where they have wide disparities between and among salaries, this is horrible, horrendous. And I cannot understand the coalition having set the example of giving to the bottom in an equitable manner. Why they have to resort to this old, worn out, tiresome policy. So as a result of this, when you look at the increase, say, of the president has a salary of over $2 million per month. So we're not even going to deal with the allowances, just the salary. His 7% of roughly $150,000 will be his increase, roughly. His increase is non-taxable because the salary of the president is not taxed. So here you have somebody earning over $2 million per month, tax-free, is going to get a 7% increase on top of that over $2 million. And his increase will be more than 2 times the new minimum wage for the man at the bottom. Because the man at the bottom hasn't even reached $75,000 per month. Is at $74,900. Well, let me be generous and give you 75. The president's increase, the increase in the president's salary, is 2 times the minimum wage, the new minimum wage. 2 times. Other other aspects of this salary increase is that the prime minister, he pays taxes, but he gets a salary of $1,715,000 per month. So his increase is $120,500. So his increase is roughly 26 times the increase of the minimum wage earner. Can you believe these numbers?
I'm here.
The senior minister gets $869,927. This is the salary that the coalition get costs. Yes, CUSS costs in 2015. Because this salary for the senior ministers was increased by 50%, from 529,000 plus to 869,000. And this is the salary where the then opposition leader made more than a meal, climbed more than a mountain, to ensure that the coalition got enough licks and enough disdain in the eyes of the supporters and the rest of Guyanese. And he said they weren't going to accept the increases, that they had created a fund at Freedom House where their MPs were going to lodge their increases every month. And he said further, if they were to get into government, they are going to revert the salaries to the old. That is, senior minister getting $529,000 and so.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, while the senior minister was getting $529,000, the prime minister was still getting $1,600,000 something per month. So the prime minister was getting 3 times the salary of a senior minister. Even though the prime minister was a mere helper of the president. But the senior minister had substantial duties to do. But anyhow, that is for another discussion. Mm. So the increase for the senior minister is $60,895 per month, which is 12 times the increase of the minimum wage earner. And lastly, the Attorney General. The salary of the Attorney General is $1,712,483. Tax-free. Tax-free. So the increase for the Attorney General is roughly $120,000 tax-free.
Tax-free.
Tax-free. So you have the president, you have the Attorney General getting tax-free salaries, while the minimum wage earner will now have to pay taxes on roughly $9,000 because his free pay or his income tax monthly allowance is $65,000. Mm-hmm. And this was put in place since 2019 by the then coalition government. The public servants have not benefited from any increase in the threshold nor reduction in the marginal income tax rates since 2019. Since 2019. And while the coalition government had agreed that the minimum wage should not be taxed, and it was unfortunate as we were going to move to do that because of the anomaly between the 65,000 and the 70,000 that the no confidence motion came, I think it's time that that principle be enshrined where the minimum wage will not be taxed. I think that they owe to the workers for that. Okay. Yeah. So those are some of the features that this 7% has brought out. I think the one I don't see the unions making fuss about, but David, you also gave us licks, is why is the ministers, president, and everybody else benefiting from this 7% across the board? Why? Isn't $869,000 per month for senior minister enough? Isn't $1,700,000 something for a prime minister and an attorney general enough? Isn't over $2 million for the president? Isn't that enough? Why are they benefiting in this pandemic from an across the board increase? So these are some of the issues, and all the civic society, the private sector, the unions, and all those who came down, whether rightly or wrongly or whatever, on the coalition for increasing the salaries in 2015, must be able to say, no, it is not your time yet to get any salary increase. You just come in. And you have to show. Same thing you told us. And since you didn't revert the salaries as you said you were going to do, it means you have paid yourself a 50% increase on the old salaries.
There we have it. There we have it. And you see why we have to have people like Jordan on. Remember I said at the beginning, that if you are there, you know where the loopholes are. I've not heard this argument being made, not by the unions, not by any of the political parties, that because we're all fixated on the 7% not being adequate for the workers. What we have not figured in is what Jordan just said there, is that this 7% represents little or nothing for workers, but it represents an almost 50% increase for the members of cabinet. You heard it here on Politics 101. You heard it here on Politics 101. I hope the media, because I know they listen, because I see sometimes they quote from this program, I hope they're able to quote that and make it front page news in their newspapers, because it is as fundamental an observation as the observation that 7% for the workers really is nothing. But 7% for the members of the cabinet is almost a 50% increase. My Lord, Jordan, give me everything that you know. Give me everything. The state of the economy, all the figures, everything that was done before. If you were still the minister and you had to give something today, how much would you be giving?
Well, let set the stage, and then I will tell you.
Okay.
The stage that I'm setting is this. When this government came in, they were in a haste to reward the private sector for the private sector inputs into the March 2020 elections, as they were indeed in a haste to reward all those external actors who had a say in the elections. And so they went on a binge, giving away concessions left, right, and center to the private sector. And as early as 2020, I warned that as a result of destroying the tax base, the government was incurring a deficit of $90 billion on the 2020 budget. This was unheard of in our recent history. Unheard of. $90 billion deficit on the 2020 budget. That is what the 2020 budget has, as a result of destroying the tax base. When the full effect of the tax measures that they gave in 2020 would have taken in 2021, would have taken effect in 2021, further eroding the tax base, it resulted in them incurring an even bigger deficit in 2021 than they did in 2020. Even at the half year now, the projected deficit of the 2021 budget is $100 billion. $100 billion. And I believe it will be more because, one, they continue to give more concessions. Freight, for example, they gave a freight concession, pushing the concession to pre-pandemic times and so on. And in their own words, they say it cost them, I think, $6 billion or something like that. So I believe that deficit will be more. And so as a result, reality is hitting home where the budget is concerned. And that is why the finance minister can't even afford to give a tax-free back pay. That is why. Because the deficit is so large. The budget deficit is so large, they have destroyed the tax base, thinking that this would act as stimulus and trickle down by the private sector. It hasn't worked. The president is begging the private sector. Every time he now meets the private sector, he's begging them to trickle down the concessions that his government has given so generously. And what has been the response? The GCCI president coming and asking for further leeway. which is a euphemism for concession. Afford a leeway. That is the nature of what you're dealing with. During all of this, they gave nothing to the public servants who would have provided the stimulus that the economy needed. So if they didn't give away all of those concessions, if they prudently managed the cash transfers, particularly the transfers that went to the agricultural sector, because that is another horror show that is waiting for us, they would have had enough money in the kitty to pay an increase of between 10 and 15%, and not across the board. So that is why they'll be able to pay such an increase, not across the board. And like I said, the ministers and the government can do without any increase for this entire term if they last out the entire term, because the salaries are already substantial. And as I said, I'm not even talking about the allowances.
Mm-hmm.
It is comfortable. They can live comfortably, and they don't need any. So any savings there can go particularly to the bottom, the pensioners, the disabled, and so forth. So that is what I will do. Then, because you didn't compensate, because that salary will be permanent, because you didn't compensate them in 2020, I am arguing that they can take 20 to 25 million US from the Natural Resource Fund and pay it out as a one-off, I won't call it bonus, a one-off payment to the public servants to ease the pain and soothe the concerns and all that they've gone through during this pandemic. I don't begrudge the frontline workers the 400 million. I don't know how much it will work out to each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But my concern continues to be the dividing up of the workers. Teachers are frontline workers. Public servants are frontline workers. They don't know what the person who's in front of them got. They don't know what the next person next door to them, sitting down next to them got. There's no social distancing in offices. There's no social distancing when you meet up in the bathroom or in the lunchroom and so forth. But they are there to serve the public. And so this continued discrimination of playing one set of workers again, people saying they hear the bonus announced for the front line, but that's strategic. That is not Ashley Singh's business. That is the president's business when he meets with the soldiers at the annual dinner, Christmas dinner, or whatever they call it. And there they make the big announcement. So it's not that they didn't make any announcement. They're just waiting for the president to there's only so much they will give Ashley to say or so on. But that one is for them. So this continued playing off one set of workers against the other set, it plays right into the hands of the government. Because on the one hand, when you continue giving bonus to the soldiers, and they of course can't strike, so they have to take whatever is given to them, it means that an important sector of the working population has been taken away from you.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, and has been put in front of you if you want to cause trouble. When you give $400 million to nurses, I presume it's nurses and some, and I hope there are others, you blunt any stance that the GPSU would have to bring out the nurses if they could. I don't think they can, but even if they could, to bring out the nurses on any picket line. And note the 1999 strike. The strength of that strike rested with customs and nurses, the nurses, among a few others. But since 1999, in the post-strike period, the government had moved post-haste to move customs out of the public service, and they're now GRA, and they moved the nurses out of the public service, and they're now part of the Guyana the GPHC, which is a public corporation with different rules and so forth. So now all the troublemakers, they moved out. Deed registry, they moved out, put deed registry now on their own, and so forth. So GPSU has been weakened badly. And that is why the interest in things like strike and so on are more talk and hubris than any real attempt at action, to be quite.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the strength anymore that they had in the 1999 and pre-1999 days. They don't have that strength. And they understand the nature of the beast that they're dealing with, but it's unfortunate that they don't have the tools to deal with that beast, much less.
Yeah. So Winston, let me ask you two questions. Given everything that you've said, from the standpoint of the government, if the government is sincere, and this is stretching it, what should the government do to blunt the obvious rage in the ranks of the workers and friends of the workers, and it also has an ethnic component, I may say. If you were the government, what would you do?
Well, I part of the answer to that.
Yes.
The president needs to call in the GPSU, which they should have done a long time before, right? Rather than putting Parag and whoever else, as fronts. The president needs to call in the GPSU and talk to them, as we say, man to man. Talk to them man to man. Explain what they have in store for the public servants, how they intend to implement whatever they have in store. Request ideas from the unions. The unions have burning issues. Salary, of course, is a burning issue. Allowances, burning issue. They have debauching. They have so much debauching problems. And to hear Ashley Singh come out without consulting the unions and talk about the government next year going to set aside the monies to deal with what I consider to be a most simplistic, simpleton approach to this issue. That if David and Jordan graduate together in the same subject area, and David happened to work with Agency A, and he getting $180,000 a month, and Jordan, not so fortunate, happened to go to Agency B, and he's getting $120,000 a month. Same job title. Economist over there, economist over here. He's going to set aside, the government is going to set aside money next year to repair that gap. No, I've never heard such a simplistic argument about human resource development, productivity, performance, and all these different things. Job description, job title, job specs, and so on. You may be an economist in Agency A, but the depth of your job description is far more than mine. Even though I have the title economist, I might be a trainee economist. And so the depth of my job description is not as yours. And since when the more qualification you got is the more money you got to get.
Mm.
A job requires a certain specs, a certain academic qualification. So if you require a bachelor's degree and 3 years experience in this job, for which I'm going to pay you $200,000, there's no sense you telling me you got a PhD, 10 years experience, 10 years experience, and therefore I must pay you $500,000 in the same job. It don't work like that. But for him to come out now and say, you are going to close this gap, anomalies that exist across different agencies, because two you graduate together in environmental science, and you got an agency A, and I got an agency B, and we get in different salaries. Therefore, you're going to set aside money to close this gap. Is this how we fritter away our monies? The whole public service of Guyana. In fact, let me give you what we were trending to in our second term. We were going to delink this whole salary structures, just as how teachers have been delinked from the public service, because at one time they used to carry the same salary scale. Now they have their own teacher salary scale that are peculiar to the teaching profession. So it was our intent to delink the discipline services from this public service type salary structure that they are being forced into, because it is recognized that they also have peculiar positions and job functions and so forth, and deal with these different branches on their merit. I hated across the board increases and so on. So in my own ministry at Ministry of Finance, they will tell you, all contracted employees had to subscribe to half-yearly appraisals. I instituted an appraisal system in the Ministry of Finance for all contracted employees. I couldn't do it for the permanent employees because they came under the Public Service Commission. And the appraisal determined the gratuity. A lot of people said how that was wrong because Constitution said they must be given a gratuity. I said, read your contract, that the gratuity was payable on satisfactory performance. And you won't know somebody's satisfactory performance unless you grade them. So I implemented that, and also as a part of promotion and so forth. I don't know, some other ministries have had their own. But this, you have to put in performance appraisal systems to measure productivity and so forth. You have to, in a number of the ministries, you have to look again at their structures. I mean, although some of these ministries have undergone restructuring back at the Heights time and so forth, even what was done at the Heights time has collapsed. And so you got a lot of overlapping, duplication, and all kinds of things in the ministries. When so-called computerization was introduced, we used to have a typist pool with lots of people clicking away on typewriters. But do you know we still have typist clerk in number of ministries?
Wow.
When there's no typewriter? Yes, you still have typist clerks. So there's it's a mess. It's a mess. And then, of course, you got all the contracted people and all these different things. So a whole job evaluation exercise needs to be done. And prior to that being done, it has to have an objective. The government has to understand what is its role in government and how will we execute those functions. Because there was a time when the public service didn't pay well, and so a number of departments of the public service were hived off and made into statutory agencies or departments not controlled by the Public Service Commission. And they were paid different salaries. They were given better conditions and so forth. The Guyana Forestry Commission, for example, there was a forestry department in the Ministry of Agriculture years ago. When I think they had people like Hubert Jack and so on as minister. But that was hyped off. Ghana Forestry Commission. They pay better than the public service and so on. But they're paying better, many of them paying better. Their monies come from the consolidated fund.
Mm-hmm.
Fund that is paying the public servants. So there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of anomalies and so on, but you can't go picking and choosing without doing a comprehensive work. And this is what you also got to talk to the unions about. This comprehensive work. We ought not to be afraid. Maybe in this comprehensive work, there may be some losses of jobs as a result of, amalgamation, and all these different things. Better use of computers and all these things. Well, instead of having two filing clerk going looking for the personal file of Mr. X and David Hines and so on, you have that online already. Therefore, you don't need the two filing clerks. But it doesn't mean you throw them out. So you're going to have aspects of job retraining and so forth. Mr. Jag, you're talking about important labor because we can be at full employment. I don't really know whether you understand that concept of full employment. Maybe it's a new thing. You will have full employment with high underemployment and unemployment. Maybe I should think about writing a paper on that.
Yeah.
He's talking about this country is going to meet full employment soon, and therefore you have to import labor. When you have large unemployment in this country, large sections of unemployment, you go to Linden, all the different places, huge unemployment in the 60% unemployment in some of these areas. And you're talking about importing labor instead of talking, of course, retraining this labor and
training and upgrading it.
So there's a whole gamut of activities. If the government is serious, maybe all can be done in this 4 or 5 years, but you'd set yourself a timetable of what can be accomplished in these 5 years. But they're not going to go down this road because the PPP government has always had a problem with public servants. From Jagan right through. They've always had a problem with public servants. So I have to remain optimistic, but this is a national approach. If we don't have a functioning public service, then we could kiss the oil sector goodbye. As we started doing. Right? As we already started doing. And we can't have these panaceas for every problem that come up. Oh, we got a labor shortage, import labor, and so on. No, those people you import are not beholden to us, and so forth. And you have to use imaginative strategies. I saw Gau, for example, bitterly talking about the wages that are being paid in the oil sector. And I said, as a short-term measure, the labor minister representing the government should introduce legislation to set salaries of positions in the oil sector and oil-related sectors. Just like how we have minimum wages for factory workers, gas station attendants, all these are still in the act. We can set minimum wages, and these wages could bear reflection to what is paid typically in oil sectors in emerging countries like Guyana. So if I may not have the experience, but I have the degree, then you could agree that I must be paid 60%, just of what the sector will normally pay, and so on, to remove this angst that is going to be taking place in a sector that seems unmanageable and uncontrollable already. That is the oil sector. But it just calls for imagination, and you can't do all of this work if you don't want to talk to the other 50% of this population. And you can't get anywhere if every time somebody talks something that you don't like, you throw mud at them, you label them, you know, and so on. They seem to be good at doing that. They don't want to listen. If it comes from somebody else and not them, no, we don't use it. We don't implement it because it comes from the coalition. We're too young a nation with too few resources to be going down that road. You know what I mean? Even big countries like United States, you know, I mean, you don't see them coming in and then tearing down everything that Trump did and you know,
Right.
just like him and so on. You know, but we don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah. Winston, we're running down on time. What would you, I know you've given a critique of the approach of trade unions, so implicitly that's some advice to the trade unions on how to approach these matters going forward. But in the face of the offer to the workers, if you were to advise the trade unions what to do tomorrow, in the coming weeks, what would you advise?
Look, David, we have to deal in the realm of possibilities. I know people, when they're upset and so on, they say boots on the ground and all these kinds of stories. But we don't look at objective situations and so forth. And the days of when Hyde and Norton and so on were able to mobilize 15, 20,000 persons consistently, so as to bring about the kind of engagement that the government had refused at that time to engage in, and to bring about the kind of engagement that the region and internationally had done. I don't know that you'll be able to do that because, first of all, you're in a pandemic and they can claim how you're breaking laws and so forth and so on, and given previous experiences and so forth, where you have to be scouting around looking for a lawyer to help out these people and so on. I don't know. I will not be telling people to do things where they themselves are going to end up on the thing on the string. So the strategy has to change in other directions. I think it would be reckless to be saying those directions openly here. But I think it has to change in other directions that can still bring about the desired effect. But it can't just be writing letters. As you can see, that has been tried. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. Guyana is an oil producing state, and to get the sympathy and the ears and the attention of the international community going to require much more than writing letters, because everybody and their uncle is looking for a peace. Everybody and their uncle. And so they are not prepared, whether locally or internationally, to get involved the same way that they would have been involved, say, 20 years ago. And we have to understand these changes in the objective conditions. We are trying to rely on old and past glory. Those are in the past. We have to understand the situation that we are in and apply new techniques to achieve the same objective that we were trying to achieve 20 years ago.
$9 billion unaudited. What's your take? Why?
You know, if that had happened under the coalition, they talk about the pre-460. You know, again, as I said, we have these people who are always looking for some balancing of scales. Well, you know, the coalition government didn't do it, and therefore this and that. Look, when 2015 came, we had no skills in oil, and we had no money. You understand the pressures that came upon us as it related to sugar and all these kind of things. Plus, some members in the private sector trying to hold the economy to ransom and so on. We haven't had much money. But eventually we had enough technical assistance that was able to build some capacity in the Guyana Revenue Authority. And they had started to do some work on the pre-audit, the 460 million. And it's only until the World Bank finally gave us a $20 million loan in March of 2019 that some of that money was used to hire market IH market and whatever else to complete the pre-oil audit, the $460 million. That audit has been completed, and it hasn't been made public. So we have to create a lot of noise to make certain that audit is made public. No audit is secret, none. The 9.5 billion, that was already known. Again, as I said, the excuse that is being made by Jagdeo is unheard of, and I don't understand how we can get away, as indeed he has gotten away with so many other things. Whether it's the Borby's Bridge, the Marriott Hotel, the Skeldon estate, he has gotten away. He like Teflon. He like the Teflon done. Nothing sticks to him. How you think if we didn't do that audit in 9.5 billion, the whole Guyana would have come down on us? But he has come up with something that says we don't have sufficient local content. There's nowhere in any one of the PSA that says the audits must be done by local firms. This is an audit that Guyana has to conduct. And by right, anyhow, is the Auditor General who's responsible for all audits as it relates to government.
Mm-hmm.
And where he can't do the audit himself because he doesn't have capacity, he contracts out the audit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He contracts out the audit. So they could have hired an international firm under the Auditor General, and the Auditor General could have brought in support from local firms, and they could have had that $9.5 billion audited. Because the reality is, some people estimate, they saw one estimate up to last week, that as much as 25% of that $9.5 could be in doubt. But even if you went to just 1%, look at the savings that would have gone back to profit, of which you would have got 50%. Look at the savings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this thing that telling you now that the audit will be done, I mean, who is fooling whom? Who is fooling whom? You got another audit on your shoulder immediately after this 9.5 for PRO, and then you got Yellowtail. And 9.5 is for what now? For experience? Because whatever you find in 9.5, you can't go on whole Exxon anymore.
Not comfortable, right?
Time must pass.
Your time must pass.
But he gets away with this thing that says you don't have enough local content. Where in the world this would have happened?
Mm-hmm.
Don't do an audit because you don't have enough local content. And this is what I say, and I'm happily seeing some of the press, Starbuck News, Kacho News, and so on, now thinking in relation to the Natural Resource Fund. The government is trying to get the most perfect of everything in terms of legislation, not implementation, in terms of legislation. But we got lots of legislation in this country that we thought were perfect until we implemented. And that is why you now have a Law Reform Commission. That as problems are thrown up, the Law Reform Commission will be able to recommend changes to the law. And don't matter, look after how long the local content legislation that they say will be ready next month to go to Parliament. Look how many people are still complaining that the local content legislation has in it things that are not feasible.
Yeah.
But when you give David Hines and say, look at this thing, David Hines give you his critique of it. You go and give 100 more people, they give you different critique. David Hines is a patriot. His critique got value in it. You got a number of carpetbaggers who putting up critique so that they could get jobs.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So that they could get jobs. And you run around hollering that institution X say the Natural Resource Fund is not this and not that and not that. Not realizing they got jockeying for positions. Jockeying for positions. You know, but these are all things that they are unfortunate. And I think even in today's papers, I see Energy Minister from Trinidad, Stuart Young, is warning Guyana and Suriname about these carpetbaggers.
Yeah.
Set themselves up as, you know, the know-alls and so forth. And then you fall for them. They're looking for money. And they say we are the prime suspects.
for that kind of stuff. Yes.
That kind of story.
Yeah. Winston, before you go, let me ask you a couple of political questions. There's the big race in the PNC. I don't know whether you're a card-carrying member of the party or not.
My friend, David, I don't know how many times I'm going to say this. In fact, I see HK Lal in his column yesterday or the day before come up with this foolishness that I'm a PNC stalwart. Look, I have never been a member of any party. And I said this 1,000 times, that even in cabinet, His Excellency President Granger used to say, plus the Jordanite party of one.
Which gives me the best platform to ask you these questions. What should the new PNC leader, from your standpoint as a Jordanite, what should the new PNC leader be focusing on moving forward?
New PNC leader must be focusing on his base. His base. No base, no politician. Our base has dwindled. Our base has been left behind. Our base has been underserved and unserved. While we go chasing after illusory votes and people. My friend, if you don't have a solid foundation, you can't build. And whether you want to say you're not black party, white party, pink party, or so on, reality forces you to take the position that the bulk of our support comes from African Guyanese. And we have to make them feel comfortable in this party. So you have to go home and go in the fields and bring back all those who have left for whatever reason. You have to consolidate your base before you go out there looking for anything else. I 2 days ago, I think it was, John Cambridge.
Yes.
Had a letter or an article or something.
A letter in Village Voice.
Africans must stop whispering. We must speak our truths. Others are speaking theirs. But we are afraid to speak our truths. Look, David, one of the reasons I've never joined any party is because I don't want to be bound. I don't want to be hamstrung. I don't want to be cul-de-sac. I have very strong views, and I want to be able to put them out there. That's why whatever I say bears no relation to APNU, AFC, coalition, anything. They are free to take those parts of what I say and form their own policy and so on. But I will not be hamstrung because I have to look over my back at some person who's financing the party, or somebody got to call me in the office and say, man, Winston, don't say that because, X and Y. You have to build the party, its philosophy, its finances, its everything before you move on. And if you go in the election and you lose, my friend, the next best thing is to make certain that whatever you gain counts at the table. That is sharing. You have to make certain that it counts. You may not win the presidency, but those 47, 48% of the people who vote for you, you have to be at the table when it is sharing. And make certain that those people got a reason for staying with you.
Well,
people are quick, when you say this, people are quick to label you racist. Look, man, I'm 64 years old. So when they want to label me racist, everybody knows me from Ministry of Finance. No, I was one of the fiercest ministers they ever had. They said that to me on many occasions, from the triple right up. So I'm never fearful of anybody calling me a racist and all this kind of story. I speak my truths. And my truth is for people who have been here after the indigenous people and the Europeans, our lot is a sorry lot when it comes to every conceivable indicator of progress internationally. Our lot is a sorry lot. And again, I will come back to that thing that I said. Parties win election, not governments. Parties win election. And so the new leadership has to understand that it is parties that win election. And if you win the election, it is the party.
From what you've heard and seen, those who are vying for the top leadership of the party, do you think that there is some capacity there to get to where you are pointing?
I believe if we had it within us, my preference would have been for somebody in the age range of about 42 to maybe 50. But not a Johnny or a Jane come lately. Somebody who would have progressed through the ranks of the party, understands the party, its philosophy, its founding principles, understanding the direction which the party has to go, has a flair for international relations, understands the pulse of the society, and knows how to win elections. I would have gone for that. But since you have three in the race, I would have preferred them to have met in some kind of caucus and decide, look, what we're doing here, even though it's under the rubric of democracy and so on, is really tearing the party further apart. And therefore, we're big enough to say, listen, I think this leadership should go to X person, and we will be part of that triumvirate of leadership that will take this party over the next 3-4 years into the next election with a winning philosophy and state and slate. I fear that the bloodletting that has taken place over the last couple of weeks and so forth may have a lasting impact on how the party and how fast the party is able to reform itself and move forward, on how far unity can be brought back into the party. I fear that. I'm hoping my fear is misplaced, but I'm a human being.
The words and the wisdom there of Winston Jordan has been close enough to the action and the players to make that assessment. Winston, thanks again for coming on and shedding some light. I didn't get to questions from the viewers, but they've been very animated as usual on the issues that you've raised. And so I want to thank you for moving the conversation to another level. And I'll be having you back soon.
Thank you, David. You know, I'm at home. As I said to people, I'm no longer in the world of work. I'm at home, and I'm happy to be at home and look after myself and my home and so forth. So once I have the time, I have no problem in doing this here. I will wish to see many more of my ministers in cabinet come out and do this. You know,
yes,
it feels a bit lonely.
I know that feeling. All right, Winston Jordan there. He's giving us his perspectives on the general economy, on the 7%, really shedding some light. And at the end there, doing some political analysis and punditry. I think the last point he made about the three people who were in the race, having a meeting and coming to some common agreement, there is a lot of merit in that. You're listening. Until, well, let me ask permission. Thursday, I'm taking off. It's a miracle. My family, they're doing the Thanksgiving thing. I've not seen my mother and my sisters and my nieces and so on for almost 2 years. And they have always, since I was a boy, supported my politics. But they've asked me to take 1 day leave. And so on Thursday, I will be Turkeying. Well, we don't do Turkey, but I'll be with my family, and I'll take a break on Thursday. So I'm going to see you all back next Tuesday with your permission. With your permission, I'm asking for Thursday off, and so I'll see you back next Monday. Next week, Monday. Next week, I hope to get the union leaders to come on and to give their perspective. But until then, those of you in America, enjoy your Thanksgiving break. And I know Guyana now is so, I wouldn't say Americanized, but so up with what's happening in America that some of you may be celebrating Thanksgiving in Guyana. Until next week, David Hines signing out with much love and to say we've got work to do.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.